my trust fund. The words cut through the music like a blade through silk. I was standing by the kitchen island when I heard them. The catering staff had just brought out the second course, salmon with that lemon dill thing my mother always insisted on for special occasions, and my father's voice carried across the room the way it always did when he wanted everyone to hear without seeming like he was performing. Of course she'll do it. Audra's always known what's right for this family. That was my name being spoken like a contract someone else had signed for me. I should back up. My name is Audra Wexler. I'm 28 years old. I work as a museum archivist in Boston, which is a job nobody at my parents' parties ever knows how to ask about. So they usually just say something like, "Still doing your little thing with the old books," and move on. My younger brother is named Tobin. That night was his 21st birthday. My parents had rented out a private dining room at this stupid waterfront place in Marblehead that cost more for one evening than my rent. I'd flown in from Boston for the weekend. I had a return ticket for Sunday afternoon. I had no idea, walking through those etched glass doors with a wrapped gift under my arm, that I was about to spend the next 72 hours of my life in 3 different states and 1 emergency room. But back to the kitchen island. I was hovering near the catering setup because the main floor felt like a wedding I hadn't been invited to. There were maybe 40 people there. Tobin's friends from Babson, my father's law partners, my mother's tennis ladies, a few cousins I see once a year and never recognize at first. I'd already done the rounds, smiled at the right people, said the right things. I was on my second glass of wine and counting how many more hours until I could go back to my hotel. My grandfather, on my mother's side, set up the trust when I was 9. His name was Whit Beauregard, and he ran a printing business in Worcester for 46 years before he sold it for what my mother used to whisper was a real number. He died when I was 15. He had liked me. He didn't really like anyone else in our family, and looking back, he was probably the only person who saw clearly what kind of household I was growing up in. The trust was substantial. I'm going to say that and let it sit there, because I don't think the exact figure matters for what I'm telling you. What matters is that my grandfather wrote it in such a way that I couldn't touch the principal until I turned 30, that my parents had no signing authority, and that the trustee was a lawyer named Mr. Hollifield, who'd been my grandfather's friend since the Korean War. Tobin wasn't in the trust at all. My grandfather had been very specific about that. He'd watched my parents raise Tobin, and he had opinions. I'd been getting distributions for living expenses since I turned 23. Nothing wild. Enough to pay rent and student loans and have a small cushion. The rest of it just sat there, growing, waiting for me to be old enough in my grandfather's estimation to handle it. My parents knew about the trust, obviously. They'd been told about it after the funeral. And my mother had cried for 3 days, not because her father was dead, but because she hadn't gotten what she thought was coming to her. She got plenty. The house. The retirement accounts. The vacation place in New Hampshire. But the trust had Whit's signature on it, and her name was nowhere. So back to the kitchen island. My father said my name in that performing voice, and I felt my shoulders go up around my ears the way they always do when I sense something coming. He walked toward me with my mother trailing behind him. Tobin was somewhere on the patio with his friends, doing what 21-year-old men with too much money and not enough parenting do. I could hear them laughing about something. Sweetheart. My father has this way of saying sweetheart that means I'm about to ask you for something and you're going to give it to me. We wanted to talk to you about Tobin's gift. I already had a gift for Tobin, a first edition of a book he'd been obsessed with in high school. It had cost me almost $400, and he wouldn't appreciate it for 10 years if ever. But I'd bought it because he was my brother, and I still believed, somewhere underneath everything, that being his sister meant something. I got him a book, I said. My mother gave that small laugh she has, the one that says how cute. Honey, no. The gift. The car. I looked at her. What car? The BMW, my father said, like I was being slow on purpose. We told you about this. You did not tell me about this. At Easter, my mother said, when we were all at the house. You were there. I had been at their house at Easter. I had eaten ham and listened to my father complain about a case for 2 hours and gone back to my hotel by 8. Nobody had mentioned a BMW. I would have remembered a BMW. I don't remember that conversation, I said carefully. My father's jaw did the thing it does. Audra, don't be difficult tonight. It's your brother's birthday. I'm not being difficult. I'm telling you I don't remember a conversation about buying my brother a BMW. Not buying, my mother said, pulling from the trust. We're talking about $72,000. Mr. Hollifield can process it in a week. We already spoke to him. There's a particular feeling that happens to you when you realize the people who raised you have been having entire conversations about your money behind your back. It's not anger first. Anger comes later. The first feeling is a kind of cold, underwater quiet, like someone has pushed your head below the surface and is holding you there to see how long you'll wait before you start to fight. You spoke to Mr. Hollifield. He was very accommodating, my father said. He just needs your counter-signature. I'm not signing anything. My mother's face changed. I watched it happen in real time, the way her cheeks tightened and her eyes went small and bright. Audra, we're not asking. I'm not signing anything, I said again. My voice was steady. I was almost proud of how steady it was. It's $72,000, my father said. Out of what? Out of millions. Don't make this a thing. It's my money. The words hung there between us. I'd never said it out loud before. Not to them. Not like that. In my head, I'd said it 1,000 times. Walking down Newbury Street, sitting in my apartment in the dark, lying awake at 3 a.m, trying to figure out why I felt like a fraud for having something my grandfather had specifically and legally given me. But I'd never said it to their faces. It came out smaller than I meant it. It still came out. My father's face went through several expressions in about 2 seconds. Disbelief. Then something colder. Excuse me, it's my money. Grandpa Witt left it to me, not to Tobin, not to you. To me. Lower your voice, my mother hissed. I hadn't raised my voice. That was the thing. I was talking quieter than the room. But she said it like I was screaming. Tobin doesn't need a BMW. He has the Audi you bought him at graduation. He's a junior in college. He lives at home. He's 21, my mother said. 21 is a milestone. We want him to feel celebrated. Celebrate him with your money. I shouldn't have said it like that. I know that now. Even at the time I knew. But it had been a long Saturday, and a long flight, and a long lifetime of being the practice child. The one they'd figured out parenting on before they decided to actually try with my brother. And the words came out before I could file them down. My father stepped closer to me. He was a big man, 6'2", ex-college rower, still carrying himself like he was about to win an argument in a courtroom. You ungrateful, he said, and stopped, and I watched him decide whether to finish the sentence. Philip, my mother said. He didn't look at her, he was looking at me. Everything you have, every advantage, the schools, the trips, the cushion under your feet your whole life. And you can't do this one thing for your brother. It's not one thing. It's $72,000. Out of what? Out of what's mine? I felt rather than saw the room get quieter. People had picked up on the tone. Heads were starting to turn. I remember thinking very clearly, in that strange, detached way you think things when something bad is about to happen, that my mother was going to be furious about the scene before she was furious about anything else. Tobin came in from the patio. He must have heard his name. He had a bottle of beer in one hand and that specific smirk he'd been perfecting since middle school. The one that says, I already know I'm winning. What's the holdup, he said. Did she say yes yet? That was when I understood that he had known. That all of them had known. That this was the plan. That the dinner was the setting. That they had picked a room full of witnesses on purpose because they thought I wouldn't make a scene in public. And they had calculated this and rehearsed it and assumed me into the script. I'm not buying you a car, Tobin. He laughed. He actually laughed. Yeah, you are. No, I'm really not. Audra, don't be a bitch about this. It's my birthday. My father didn't correct him. My mother didn't correct him. They stood there and let my 21-year-old brother call me that in front of his college friends and the waitstaff and a great aunt I hadn't seen since I was 14. I set my wine glass down on the kitchen island. My hand was shaking. I'm going to get my coat. Sit down, my father said. I'm leaving. Audra. I'll see you at Christmas, maybe. I turned to walk toward the coat check. I had taken maybe 3 steps when my father grabbed my arm. Not gently. He spun me around hard enough that my shoulder wrenched and I heard myself make a small sound, and then his other hand came up and he hit me across the face with the back of his fist. I want to tell you what that felt like, but I think you already know if you've ever been hit by someone who's supposed to love you. The pain is the smallest part. The pain comes later. The thing that happens first is that the entire world you've been living in collapses in on itself, like a building that's been waiting 40 years to fall. I went sideways. My head clipped the edge of the kitchen island. I remember the sound more than the feeling. A sharp, dull crack, like dropping a melon on tile. Then I was on the floor. There was screaming. Some of it was mine. Most of it wasn't. I remember a woman in a navy blue dress, one of my mother's tennis friends, kneeling next to me and saying, ma'am, can you hear me, ma'am?" like I was somebody's grandmother who'd fallen in a parking lot. I could hear my mother saying, she's fine, she just slipped," like she could rewrite what had just happened if she said it loud enough and fast enough. The next clear thing I remember is the inside of the ambulance. A young paramedic with a goatee was asking me what year it was. I told him. He asked me who the president was. I told him. He asked me what had happened, and I opened my mouth, and then I looked past him through the open back doors of the ambulance, and I saw my father standing in the parking lot with his arms crossed, watching, and I closed my mouth. "I fell," I said. The paramedic looked at me for a long second. "You fell." "I fell into the counter." He didn't say anything. He just made a note on his clipboard, and then he went to the front, and they shut the doors. At the hospital, they did a CT scan. I had a concussion, what they called moderate. I had a hairline fracture in my left cheekbone. I had a split lip. I had bruising on my upper arm in the shape of a man's hand. The ER doctor was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and very steady eyes. Her name was Dr. Myriel Asante. I remember her name because I held on to it like a piece of driftwood for the next 48 hours. She came in after the scan results. She sat down next to my bed. She closed the door first. "Audra, I need to ask you some questions, and I want you to know that you don't have to have anyone in the room with you to answer them. Not your parents. Not anyone. Just me. Okay. How did this happen?" "I fell." She didn't blink. "Onto your cheekbone?" "Yes. And the bruising on your arm from the fall." I started to cry. I hadn't cried yet. I'd been very calm and very useful and very cooperative all the way through the ambulance and the intake and the scan. And then this woman closed the door and asked me a question I'd been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me. And I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. She didn't move. She didn't hand me a tissue. She just sat there and waited until I could talk again. My father hit me. Okay. At my brother's birthday dinner. He hit me because I wouldn't give my brother $72,000 for a car. Okay, I'm going to call somebody. Is that all right with you? Who? A social worker. And after that, if you want, the police. But only if you want. I sat there for a long time. My head was pounding. The ice pack on my cheek was leaking down my collar. "Yes," I said. "Both." She got up and went to the door. Then she turned back. "Audra, is there anyone we can call who is not your family? A friend? Anyone?" I gave her the number for my best friend, Inez Rasmussen, who lived in Cambridge and who I had known since freshman year at Smith. Dr. Tilm. Asante wrote it down, and then she went out and closed the door behind her. I sat in that hospital bed and I tried to think about whether any of this was actually happening. The room had that fluorescent humming you get in hospitals at night. Somebody in the next bay was groaning quietly. A monitor was beeping in 4:44 time. A nurse came in and started an IV for the headache. She didn't ask me anything. She just hummed under her breath while she worked. About 40 minutes later, there was a knock and a small woman in a gray cardigan came in. She introduced herself as Mariko Pendleton, the social worker on call. She had a quiet voice and a way of leaving silences open without making them weird. We talked for almost an hour. She wrote things down. She asked me whether I was safe to go home. I told her I lived in Boston. She said no tonight. Was I safe to go home tonight? I told her my parents lived an hour from the hospital and that I'd been staying at a hotel in town, but that I hadn't checked my phone, that my parents could be at the hotel, that my parents would absolutely be at the hotel, that my mother had a key from when she dropped off the dress I borrowed for the dinner. Mariko Pendleton nodded slowly and made another note. Audra, I think we should talk about options for tonight. That was when my phone started ringing. I'd had it on silent in my purse, and now I pulled it out, and I saw 47 missed calls. From my mother, from my father, from Tobin, from cousins, from numbers I didn't recognize. I also had 3 voicemails from Mr. Hollifield. Mr. Hollifield was the trustee. Hollifield was my grandfather's friend. I had not called Mr. Hollifield. I played the most recent voicemail on speaker. Mariko Pendleton sat there and listened with me. His voice was thin, the way old men's voices get, but very clear. Audra, this is Wendell Hollifield. I've received a phone call from your father this evening that I found troubling. He informed me there had been an accident and that you were unconscious and that he needed to make some emergency decisions about your account. I told him I would need to speak to you directly. I have been calling. I will continue to call. Please pick up the phone, my dear, at any hour. I am awake. Something is wrong. I sat there holding the phone. He tried to take the money. Mariko Pendleton tilted her head. While you were in the hospital. He tried to call the trustee and pretend I was incapacitated so he could move it. While I was in the ambulance. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very gently, Audra, I think you might want to call Mr. Hollifield back. I called him. He answered on the second ring. I told him what had happened. I told him all of it. The dinner, the BMW, the hit, the floor, the ER. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Audra, I'm going to drive down in the morning. I'll be there by 10. Where are you staying tonight? I don't know. I'm going to make some arrangements. Stay where you are. Don't talk to your parents. Don't sign anything. If they come to the hospital can refuse to let them up. I'll call ahead. Okay. And Audra, I'm so sorry. Your grandfather was afraid of this. He told me once. He said you were the one who saw clearly. He said when the time came, you would need someone in your corner. I'm in your corner. Do you understand? I started crying again. I couldn't talk. He stayed on the line until I could. And then he said, "Good night, sweetheart," and he hung up. Inez got to the hospital around 2 a.m. She'd driven from Cambridge in her pajamas. She brought a duffel bag with clean clothes and a toothbrush and a phone charger. She didn't ask any questions. She just sat in the chair next to my bed and held my good hand and watched me try to sleep through the headache. In the morning, Mr. Hollifield arrived at 10 o'clock exactly. He was in his late 70s, very thin, in a brown suit and bow tie. He sat down in the chair across from my bed and put a leather folder on his knees and asked me, in a very gentle but very direct voice, what I wanted to do. I had thought about this all night. I had not slept. I want him charged, I said. My father. I want a restraining order. I want my mother kept away from the trust permanently. I want it in writing that nobody but me can authorize a distribution. I want my address taken off all the records they have. I want the alarm code on my apartment changed. I want a copy of every communication they've sent to your office in the last 6 months. I want to know everything they tried to do behind my back. Mr. Hollifield wrote it all down. When he finished writing, he looked up. All of that is doable. Some of it is already done. After the call last night, I had my associate draft an emergency motion. We're filing a protective order with the probate court this morning. It will be on the judge's desk by noon. What does that do? It permanently bars your parents from any access to the trust, any communication with my office regarding the trust, and any decisions regarding your finances under any circumstances, including medical incapacitation. It also documents your father's attempted intervention last night, which, depending on how the police investigation goes, could be relevant to charges beyond the assault. What charges? He folded his hands. Attempted fraud against a beneficiary. Conspiracy. Your father is an attorney, Audra. He knew what he was doing when he called me. He knew it was a crime. I sat there. The room had gone very still. He's going to be disbarred. That is one possible outcome. Yes. The police came at noon. A detective named Audra Peterson took my statement. She had been briefed by Dr. Asante. She had photographs of my face from the night before. She had the paramedics' report. She had a witness list from the restaurant, which had already faxed it over because apparently the manager had been horrified by what he'd seen and had wanted to make sure it didn't get buried. I made a statement. I named everyone. I told her about my brother calling me a bitch, and my mother covering for my father, and my father calling Mr. Hollifield from the parking lot while I was in the ambulance. Detective Peterson took it all down, and then she looked at me and said, "We're going to pick him up today. Today. This afternoon. The DA's office has already been in touch with his profession and the planning element. We're looking at a felony charge. Whether it sticks at that level is up to the prosecutor." But yes, today. I asked her if I needed to be anywhere. She said no. She said I needed to rest, and that someone from the victim advocate's office would call me to walk me through what came next. I went home, except I didn't go home because my apartment in Boston suddenly felt like the wrong place to be alone. Inez took me to her place in Cambridge. Mr. Hollifield arranged a security consultation for my apartment building. New locks, a doorman protocol, the works. He paid for it out of the trust. He told me my grandfather would have wanted it that way. The next few weeks were a blur. My father was arrested at his office. He posted bail the same day. He was on administrative leave from his firm within 72 hours. The probate order went through, which meant his name was permanently removed from any contact with Mr. Hollifield's office. The Bar Association opened an inquiry. My mother left 43 voicemails before I blocked her number. Tobin sent one text that said, "You ruined my birthday," and I screenshotted it and gave it to my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer now. Her name was Solange Berrigan, and she was the best family law attorney in Eastern Massachusetts, according to Mr. Hollifield, who'd known her for 30 years. She handled the civil side, the restraining orders, the cease and desist letters, the very polite, very expensive letters that went to my parents' lawyer, explaining what would happen if anyone in my family tried to contact me directly ever again. I learned things during those weeks that I wished I'd known earlier. I learned that I had been the family ATM since I was old enough to sign checks. The vacation in Maine 3 years ago, the one I'd thought my parents paid for. They processed it through the trust. The kitchen renovation, the one my mother had been so proud of. The trust. Tobin's tuition at Babson. The trust. Every year, year after year, requests had come through Mr. Hollifield's office for things they claimed were for me but were actually for them. Mr. Hollifield had been quietly refusing about a third of them. The ones he'd approved had been the ones that on paper looked like legitimate family expenses for a minor child or a dependent young adult. He had not realized, until now, the pattern. He had not realized I didn't know about any of it. He apologized to me. I told him not to. I told him my grandfather had picked the right person. The criminal case took 14 months to resolve. My father pleaded out in the end. Felony assault, 1 count of attempted financial exploitation, 18-month suspended sentence, 2 years probation, mandatory anger management, no contact with me for 10 years. He surrendered his law license voluntarily before the bar could pull it formally. He's selling insurance now in a town 2 hours from where I grew up. I know, because Inez looked him up once and told me before I could tell her not to. My mother was charged with conspiracy, but the prosecutor didn't pursue it. I was told this was because she would have been very sympathetic on the stand and because her involvement in the trust call was harder to prove. I don't know if I believe that or if it was something else, I stopped asking. She and my father separated about a year after the arrest. I heard about it from a cousin I still talk to. Apparently, she blamed him for everything that had happened, which is a kind of magical thinking I find almost impressive. Tobin dropped out of Babson. He moved to Florida. He works at a marina now and posts pictures of fish on Instagram. I don't follow him. I do, occasionally, when I can't sleep, look at his profile and try to figure out what I feel. The answer is usually nothing, which is its own kind of grief. I bought a condo in the South End with my own money, not the trust. I haven't touched the trust except to pay legal fees and the security consultation I had saved for years. The condo is small and has a window over a courtyard with a magnolia tree, and I sit there in the mornings with my coffee and read books my brother will never know exist. Mr. Refart. Hallfield retired last spring. He passed the trust to his daughter, who is also a lawyer and who is just as careful as he was. She and I have lunch twice a year. I bring her flowers from a little shop near my apartment. I turned 30 last month. The trust unlocked. I'm not going to tell you what's in it. What I will tell you is that I have not changed my life. I still take the bus to work. I still bring my lunch in a Tupperware. I still send a card to Dr. Asante every Christmas, and I still keep Detective Peterson's business card in the top drawer of my desk where I can see it. I have a partner now. His name is Yarrow. He is kind in the small daily way that I did not believe was possible for most of my life. He knows everything. He met Inez before he met any of my biological relatives, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the right order. Sometimes people ask me if I forgive my parents. I find it a strange question. Forgiveness is something you offer to someone who has acknowledged what they did. My father has never said the words. My mother has never said the words. I am not waiting. What I will say is this. The night my father hit me, I genuinely thought he had taken something from me I would never get back. The version of myself who still believed her family was her family. The girl who still flew home and sat through dinners and pretended. He did take her in a way. She did not survive that night. But she was already dying. I see that now. She had been dying for years, slowly. Every time I bought my brother soda from the convenience store at 11 at night. Every time I drove my mother to the airport at 5 in the morning. Every time I sent a check for something that should not have been my responsibility. She was dying the whole time, and what happened at that dinner just finished her off. The woman writing this is somebody else. She is somebody I like. She is somebody my grandfather would have liked too, I think. She is the person he was trying to protect when he wrote that trust, with all its protections and its specific clauses and its very particular trustee. I think about him often now. I think about him sitting in his lawyer's office in Worcester in 1995, drafting the document that would, almost 30 years later, save his granddaughter's life. He could not have known how much it would matter. He knew enough. That is the thing nobody tells you about trust funds, or about families, or about the way the past reaches forward into the present to catch you when you're falling. Sometimes the only person in your corner is someone who's already dead. Sometimes the love that saves you is love that was set in motion before you were old enough to know what it was. I keep his picture on my desk. He is wearing the brown suit he wore to my mother's wedding. He is not smiling, because he did not smile in pictures, but his eyes in the photograph are looking right at the camera. He saw me. He saw all of it. And he made sure that when the time came, somebody would be there. That somebody, in the end, turned out to be me. I think about that night in Marblehead more than I'd like to admit. Not because I miss any of them. I think about it because, for almost 3 decades, I had been telling myself a story that wasn't true. And that night was the first time I let myself see it clearly. The story I had been telling myself was that my family loved me imperfectly. That my parents were doing their best. That my brother Tobin was young and would grow out of it. That if I kept giving, kept smoothing things over, kept buying the soda and driving to the airport and signing whatever my mother slid across the table, eventually the love I was earning would arrive. I had been waiting for it the way you wait for a bus that you slowly realize is never coming, except you keep standing at the stop because you've already been standing there so long. Here is the thing I understand now that I did not understand then. Every time I made it easier for them to take, I was teaching them that taking was acceptable. The $72,000 they demanded at that dinner did not come out of nowhere. It came out of years of yeses. The Maine vacation I let pass without questioning. The kitchen renovation I never asked about. The way I held my tongue when my brother was praised for things he had not done. Cause and effect is not a tidy little classroom equation. It builds slowly, in small permissions, until one day someone you love raises a hand to your face and you understand that you helped construct the path that led him to that moment. That is the hardest part to sit with. Not what my father did. What I had allowed to be possible. I am not blaming myself for being hit. I want to say that clearly because I know how these things can twist. What I am saying is that the strength I needed had been available to me all along, and I had been calling it something else. I had been calling it being difficult, being selfish, being the bad daughter. My grandfather had seen the truth of who I was when I was a child, and he had built a wall around the part of me that mattered. And for years, I had walked past that wall and refused to climb behind it, because climbing behind it meant admitting what my family really was. What I learned, and what I would say to anyone listening, is that being a good person and being a doormat are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. Kindness without a spine is not kindness. It is fear wearing nicer clothes. Real decency requires you to know where you end and where another person begins, and to defend that line even when the people testing it share your last name. I lost a family in that kitchen. I gained myself. The math is not even close. The trust unlocked last month. I have not bought anything different. I take the bus. I bring my lunch. What I bought, in the end, was the woman writing these sentences. She was worth every penny.